Our Las Vegas real estate investing podcast is here. Can't wait to get started with you. Adrian, welcome. Thanks so much for being a guest on our show. How are you doing today?
Hi, May. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. Somebody just informed me that it's going to be very hot today, so I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. So yeah, we're here to talk to you with your expert knowledge. I know you're an investor friendly agent in Las Vegas, and I'm here as a mortgage specialist to kind of focus a little bit on the investor financing side. I just wanted to know, can you let the viewers know a little bit briefly about who you are? 30-second bio.
Thank you. My name is Adrian Ornelas. I'm a real estate broker here in the Las Vegas real estate market. I've been helping people sell and buy. Honest, that this is going to be my 20th year, technically.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a milestone.
That is a milestone. It's crazy. Never imagined. But yeah, so it's been a long time. And the only experience I've ever had in any real estate market has been here. So I feel that I know the market very well. I've seen different stages of the market, as we know in 2008, how all that changed a lot of things. And so then that brought a lot of investors in since 2009, 2010, 2011, and 2012. And every one of those periods had different type of investors that were honestly um, really taking the opportunity to be able to take advantage of the market that a lot of other people couldn't see or they just couldn't really buy. So investors have been, really making Las Vegas a prime market to be able to make better use of their money. And so till this day, I still either one, I help whatever investor comes my way, or I try to actually convert regular people into investors because it's a good thing to do for your future.
Right. No, that's fantastic. I love the Las Vegas market. I think it's great. I want to dabble into Vegas. I know we connected and I find there's a lot of opportunity and growth within that city. I have been seeing a lot of businesses in Hollywood, LA moving to Vegas. I think Universal's going there. There's a few other production companies and I saw actually In and Out, they're building the largest In and Out there. I know that's kind of off our little script, but I was pretty excited when I saw that.
Yeah, no, I mean it's that place is going to be packed.
Mhm.
And it's
It's
going to
like
be, we create landmarks for a lot of different things, and people are going to come to see that because it's in and out.
totally
Yeah.
very iconic establishment for sure. And a favorite of mine, I'm not sure, are you into it too?
Oh, I have two restaurants that I go every week, kind of shamefully, but In and Out is one of them. And so I mean I had Wendy's yesterday, and like I feel awful about it because I should have had In and Out
Is it because
already.
you felt like you're cheating on In and Out? Is that why or what?
It's just much cleaner.
Mhm.
It's the best, bang for your buck on any burger.
Yeah.
It's yeah, yeah, you know what to
Yeah.
expect, all of that stuff.
Awesome. So I guess let's just kind of dive into some of these questions and topics around investments, properties, and
All right.
the market in Vegas. So I guess what would you say some of the key differences you've observed between working with investors versus traditional home buyers?
Yeah. So, the investor is looking at basically their net profit they're going to make of it, right? And they're comparing whatever cash they have on hand and what their return is going to be
Mhm.
on that property. And there's different mindsets many times depending where that investor is coming from and what that money is going to do, right? A lot of times people from California come here and those people just, look at the difference between the pricing over there and not only that, but then the rental restrictions that are associated, with every other state. Here in Nevada is more investor friendly. It's very rare for, you have a tenant that you can't get rid of and those types of things. And so the investor comes in and looks to see what they could purchase with the money that they have. And then us as the agents, well, you're a good agent and you're looking out for your client, you want to help them find a property that is actually going to make sense and that's also going to, have a really high potential of appreciation as well. So on top of, being able to have a good amount of rents and, solid tenants depending where that property is located, but also the potential of that property also appreciating in value because, at some point most investors will want to exit or do something else with that money. And so typically you're looking at a lot of different factors for it. When we work with people that are going to be in their potentially forever home, and most people go looking for their home that way. Not all of them, right? A lot of people are a little more, I guess, realistic into what that home could do for them now and what, they would want to do later. But the regular home buyer is just looking to have the location that they want for whatever needs they want. And then also, for that to fit their budget that they have, as opposed to, what potential profit that property could have for them. So ultimately, it becomes a location and a budget situation for most people.
Thanks, Adrian. That was great answer. Now, I've noticed Las Vegas has had some huge growth. What have you seen in changes within the investor market? 12 months, 6 months. Have you seen any changes?
Well, let me, if I may, I'm gonna go all the way back,
Okay, yeah,
because there's
you feel
different
free to do.
stages of the investor, at least that I've seen in my experience. Because in the little experience that I received or that I got back in 2006 when I first got my license, that year of 2006 was still very hyper. I don't know, busy. Everybody was still kind of the gold that everybody was looking for coming here from California, and they thought, I'm gonna just drop all this cash here, and it's gonna just multiply again and again and again. And so I remember that year, the couple buyers that I had, just starting out, we weren't able to get anything because a lot of the people that we had were being their offers were being beat by cash buyers from California or other states. Then, after 2009 or 2008, the investor also changed in the way that it felt like it was, like this wave of large institutions. And at the time, I couldn't really see it, right? Because I'm, again, very inexperienced and on the ground just trying to help regular buyers see if they could even qualify for it. In those days, it was hard to qualify. And so those investors, I mean, realistically, the value of whatever they would offer wouldn't be too high from whatever the list price was. And sometimes, many times, they would offer the bank, less than whatever the list price was, and the bank would take it over a financed, offer. And so that period of time lasted between 2009 to about 2011, and it became a little bit dormant in 2011, where a lot of investors weren't really buying. And it wasn't until 2012 that we could see the switch happening because we would, offer on a home the list price, and somebody would come in and beat us out. 20,000, 30,000, and this is on $100,000 house. And so it was a big jump for the regular buyer. And so you saw the shift happening in 2012, and that lasted just about all the way to the end of 2012. And then again, the shift is slow down a bit. And so you can see gradually, not everybody was, jumping in here to invest and just drop cash easily. But you could always see that wave start to accumulate within the span of, I'll say, 2 months to 3 months. You can see how things just shift. And so that investor eventually stops, and then the regular people will buy. And as that investor comes in, pushes the prices up, and then things settle down. Investor sees opportunity, pushes the prices up. And so that leads us all the way up to, 2018, where the market slowed down, and it was the same thing, right? The investor just kind of pushed back, rates had gone up, and so you saw a little bit of the slowdown, and the regular people maintained it. And then you saw what happened in 20. So then that was a accumulation of a whole bunch of different things. But when there's that, urge from everybody to just come in and try to grab something now before something
Right.
happens. And so
Uh-huh.
we go through those periods of time where it just feels that way. And so the last, I'll say 24, there hasn't been much of that, right? Unless a property is underpriced, then that investor comes in and they see the opportunity because they see the value that it could potentially have based on the price that they're buying it for and what it could have in value later on. And so the difference is that the aggressiveness is just isn't as much, but as there's stages of growth, So, for example, after the stadium was announced and once it started becoming a reality, then you saw some of those investors want to come in. And a lot of people have, a lot of theories of how that was going to change things dramatically. And it doesn't necessarily happen that way. It's more based on, I guess, people's perception of the city and what they're actually going to do with that money. And then just waves of population moving here. And the growth of the population is also going to bring in a lot more investment because as you mentioned, right, the growth of so many businesses coming here and seeing the potential of having customers, having customers, the potential of having customers and then needing the employees for that. And then that also, multiplies into more employment, which makes the city bigger, which needs more housing. And so that push has been going on since about 2017. It has increased to the levels that we're at now. And so we're still seeing gradual, I can't even call it gradual because actually it's a substantial amount of investment in construction that goes in to
Hmm.
build out industrial or businesses. And then that usually brings, more plumbing companies, electrical, or even, I think a lot of the difference between our economy now to what it used to be is that now we have a lot of corporate headquarters established here. And so
Hmm.
then that creates more employees for them. And it, brings money from other states here as part of this economy, which then also spreads out to everybody else. And then, that becomes an investment for housing. And typically, when people come here, realistically, they become renters. And so then the investor looks for the potential of what that tenant could do.
No, that's great. That's super insightful. Yeah, definitely. I've been seeing those trends and I've been watching Vegas for a very long time as I always have loved Vegas.
Yeah.
I went there for internship. I had some family there, lots of Hawaii community in Vegas. And
Yes.
I hope one day to actually invest in that city. I was looking in 2020, so it's funny you were talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really aggressive actually at that time. Yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah. I
Vegas
mean,
is awesome.
you had to be. I mean, the value that you would get for the price versus the rate, like those just just match so well. So
Hmm.
you
And
just kind of,
do you find, like what specific niches within the real estate investing are you seeing most activity? Are you seeing short-term rentals, flips, long-term rentals?
um, I feel that, well, I don't feel. Realistically, the data shows, and when homes go into pending status, is the majority of the purchases are of primary home purchasers, right?
Hmm.
From there on, you take on who is actually investing to buy long term as an investment as a rental property. And so I'll say that's probably about 30% of our purchases that happen every month are investors. I think since the stadium was announced, the idea of the Airbnb grew in everybody's mind because then they saw the
Hmm.
potential of having that. Even though it's been going on even before that, the city has set a lot of restrictions now. But I would say the Airbnb investor is probably only, I would say, 5% of that 30%. It's not something that, at least not that they put forward and say that that's what they're going to do. And they're always also, there's investors that move out of that section of Airbnb, and then they become long-term rentals and that type of thing. But a lot of times, there's also those investors come in and buy it as second homes, and
Uh-huh.
so a lot of times people buy it as second home, have it as an Airbnb or set it up as an Airbnb to enjoy it when they're here, and then make sure that it's also producing some type of return for them while they're not here.
No, that's yeah, that's great. You know what I love about you were mentioning earlier about how you focus on your investor clients, but you also have some conversation with your current past database of clients to kind of show them that they could, potentially go to purchase another property, an investment
Yeah.
property. I think some people have limiting beliefs, in my
Yes.
experience of what that looks like, right? They see, I would say, I don't want to generalize, but most people just, their primary concern is their primary place that they live,
Yeah.
right? But they can't see further than, having a real estate portfolio, having
Yeah.
multiple properties. How is that doable? It's definitely risky, right? And
Yeah.
if you haven't been shown or have other people in your network to kind of you can hear those conversations and dinners and stuff like that, you don't really know, right, that they
Yeah.
could do it. Do you find that you experience sometimes when you're having conversations with them, they're like, no,
Yes,
there's
100%.
no way I
Because
could do that, right?
I try to convert everybody into an investor, right? And I call it convert because I'll say realistically, a lot of people just don't have the 20% to put down on a property. And so that's the biggest obstacle when it comes to an investment property, is actually having the money for it. And then the biggest obstacle really is the how it looks like this really tall mountain for a lot of people, because it's intimidating. You hear all the bad stories, and some people just can't really wrap their head around it. And because of that, it limits what they could potentially do for their future. Right now, everybody has an idea of what they want to do with that equity of their home. But I always try to mention it to people that eventually we're all gonna get older. We're not gonna be able to work as much as we did, when you were younger. And you have to try to at least have something that could potentially grow in value. And then at the same time, if it's, which is realistically the biggest thing, is to be able to make sure that it's managed correctly. But not only the management, but the actual tenant selection or whatever processes you have set for that. Because that's the most important part of renting a property, is, making sure that that is done correctly, because then that could set you on a really bad path. And so most people always hear of the bad path, and that usually is intimidating or scary. And so you could see that fear in their eyes, because when I try to tell them, like, they kind of just go blank into, like, just can't. And I could like almost imagine seeing the movies that they have playing in their head or they've seen before, that makes them not want to do that. And what I try to express to people or explain is that, yeah, that could always happen. But the number one thing that, at least for me, when I'm doing either tenant placement or property management, is that that's the most important part of it, is the tenant selection, the tenant search. That part right there will set you on the path to be able to have a well-maintained property and to be able to have a solid investment, so that you don't have to worry that much about it. They're always going to break, just as it happens when you're living in the property. And so that's a whole aspect that just people can't quite comprehend a lot of the times. Eventually they'll get to it, but also people have limits of how much stress they're wanting to put themselves through that. And so, I don't go beyond, showing excitement about it and showing what, other people have done, and what I have done, and seeing if, it would be something that they would be motivated to want to do, because, there's energy that is going to need to, flow into that idea for them to feel comfortable with it. And so all of my clients, when they are converted and they do want to go on to the next property and leave the previous one as an investment, I help them do the whole setup from beginning all the way to the end, when we're giving keys to the tenants, and make it very, clear of what's going to happen and the potentials of whatever it is, just so that they know what it could do for them. For the most part, most people that I've helped, I'll say, since I think the first investor or conversion of an investor was probably some of the people that helped buy in between 2012 to 2018. Some of those people have now seen how that progressed and became a benefit. And I don't know if I sparked the idea or if they already, had it from somewhere else, but I truly try to help everybody get into that place where they could have something that'll have a good amount of equity for the future.
No, I love that. And it kind of boils back to kind of how we help, some of our clients, showing them, educating, ultimately it's their decision what they do, right?
Yeah.
If it's their goals, we're here to support them and help them navigate. But I'm sure that brings you a lot of joy, as much as me as well, when you see the work and effort and what they chose, their decisions, and now looking back, I hope they're in a better place than they were when they first started, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's always the goal. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing I take out of it. I guess, people always talk about satisfaction of what we do, but to me, that's, I guess the bigger, I don't know, benefit or increase of equity that everybody gets. I feel like I did a good thing a long time ago. It's fulfilling.
I feel the same way. I feel the same way. Kind of talking about financing for investors, a hot product is that DSCR, debt service covered ratio. And these types of loans really do help unlock opportunities for people. It's a non qualified loan product. As you are aware, Adrian, I'm sure you see it all the time, but it's super helpful, and it goes a different route of getting qualified compared to a traditional type of mortgage like a conventional or FHA, what have you.
Correct.
basically the way that the lender is able to qualify is strictly based on how much that property is producing in rent. We do not look at your personal income, right? So if, for instance, you lost your job or what have you, or you haven't had a job in 6 months, this product is especially great for investors. So I'm sure you've seen, Adrian, have you seen individuals in your clients receiving, using the DSCR product?
Honestly, just from far away. I haven't had anybody that I've actually helped in the process of it.
Okay.
Most of those, people that are already established and have the properties. And so, I'm a little bit, I guess, disconnected a little bit from it just because
Exactly.
I haven't dealt with it, hands-on as they're doing it. But I could see how that value is there for, every person that already has that asset. And you do hear a lot about how the investors are using it just because it makes a lot more sense in this high rate environment for people to be able to, still make a profit from their cash that they're investing into that property.
Absolutely, and it's a hot product and very popular. But from what I'm hearing with your clients, what you've kind of done is, they've lived in their house for X amount of years, and
Yes.
they decide to rent that property, and they move to their new property. By moving to their new property, they are obtaining a different type of loan, like a conventional type of
Yeah,
loan
typically,
product,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Right.
typically it'd be the FHA buyer going into their next one as a conventional.
Awesome. No, that's great. So just gonna let this reel and I'll cut this because this is my teleprompter.
No
I
problem.
got into it and I was like, oh, okay, let's see. All right, Adrian. So tell me, off-market deals are highly sought after. In this
Yes.
current Vegas market, what's your best strategy for finding these gems for your investors?
I mean, honestly, it's how would I call it? It has to be very focused. So it's a very focused type of search for whichever investor you have or yourself, right? And
Uh-huh.
so if you're looking to be in a particular community, it's always the best, right? Because if you just blanket out everything, it's too costly because most of the times the way that you reach these off-market deals is by, doing mailers or calling potential sellers, people that have had their properties for a very, very long time. And so typically, somebody that's been in their property for, 20, 30 years or more, the potential of that investment or that property becoming a good investment is much higher. And going directly to the seller is always a good proposition to be able to, I guess, make everybody
Mhm.
happy, right? The seller potentially is not going to get, a very good number from that property, even putting it in MLS because, it might be too distressed,
Mhm.
that type of thing. So typically, if you are able to, find or come across a seller that just, maybe didn't have it in mind, but you put the potential forward, that is always good for your investor or for yourself looking for an investment property because you can see how you could get a little bit ahead of what, a whole bunch of other people are looking through on Zillow and Redfin and any
Mhm.
other websites because you were able to find it before anybody gets to it.
Yeah.
But it is a very focused search if you are, looking to do that. A lot of times, of course, every investor, everybody would want to have one of those.
Mhm.
But I think you would have to really build a relationship with either an agent or whoever, is has access to these properties. Because, for example, me, right, if I have an investor, I have to first do the farm of wherever that property might be at,
Mhm.
or get the criteria of what I think could potentially be a good investment for whoever that investor is. And then, spend money on sending, flyers or
Mhm.
emails and mail to that property until, somebody it calls back and says, that they're looking to do that. And right now, I mean, it's a very competitive, off market because,
Mhm.
a lot of flippers and companies that do that, they have TV commercials. They're all over social media. So it's a very competitive market to go into because
I
these
see.
guys are looking to get their investment on it and they have a whole machine that's working towards it. And so then you have to independently look for them in a similar way. But of course, without the TV budget, that's a totally different strategy because ideally, I mean, we all want to have off-market deals. And so when we do come across, and honestly, I feel like if you are like what I always tell people, right? People
Mhm.
ask, Like, how can I find a really good deal or whatever? Especially people that, work in trades or, their neighbors. I'm like, if you ever come across your neighbor and the house looks like it needs a lot of work, like you should really ask, like, have you thought about selling the property? Like that is the closest thing you're gonna get to that. Just always asking people if they're, looking to sell their home, and you would just never know who actually is, and that might be the opportunity that you could, get into without perhaps spend all the money on the mailers and all that stuff. But it
Oh.
does take a really focused approach to be able to reach off-market deals because either one, you have somebody that is already, has a
Mhm.
machine working for them to be able to, like present those to you,
Right.
um, and make it make sense if it does. But I mean, it just takes relationships with people to be able to get to those.
Now, Adrian, if someone is kind of searching for top three qualities in a real estate investor,
Yeah.
in an agent, sorry, let
Yeah.
me restart. That
Okay.
came out funky. Adrian, what are the top three qualities that real estate investors look in an agent in Las Vegas? What would you think that would be?
The first thing is competence. I mean, honestly, when you present questions or an investor calls, as an agent, you could always tell how knowledgeable that investor is, right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of different, perceptions of what that could be. It could be a very knowledgeable investor, calling you or calling the agent, or maybe somebody that isn't very experienced. And so to be able to gauge that and know as an agent when you
Mhm.
call the agent and you ask questions, whether you're experienced or not experienced, you're gonna want two different approaches from that agent to be able to, tell you. Because unfortunately, I think an agent that works fast and works with a lot of investors probably can't go at the same pace that an unexperienced investor could, right? So then having the right agent fit what you're, looking for, your approach to it is going to make a big difference. But you want to, work with an agent that is knowledgeable and
Mhm.
could go at the same pace that you are and know the city, know, where the good properties potentially could be at, the prices of the home versus what it could potentially rent for. And so having all those dynamics match is something that you could realistically get out in one conversation. And then second to that is experience with the investor as well too, right? Because if you know, like I had mentioned earlier, you could really do a disservice to, that investor if you just put him in whatever thing that comes across. And the reason that I say that is because I think we've all looked at properties in other states. And so having our perspective of where we come from to where we're wanting to invest in is very different. Zillow and Redfin and all the websites present a very nice picture of that home, but you just don't know the neighborhood. And so that experience of that agent and their honesty is actually going to give you a much better either experience or feedback or a much better investment if that agent is realistically giving you the truth about those particular locations of the home and the potential profit that you'll get from it.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, what are some key metrics or tools that investors can use to really analyze a property? And do you as an investor agent provide that type of exercise to do the analysis of properties?
So I always give, I would say, with the most basic understanding of the analysis of it, right?
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, there's always more expenses than whatever it is, and you could do the real big analysis that a lot of people really don't understand that lingo of it.
Hmm.
So it just again depends on the stages of that investor, right? But if it's somebody that owns maybe one property, maybe owns two properties and looking to threes, like having the spreadsheet version of what that, potential profit of it, I find it sometimes isn't, very useful depending on that investor. But essentially, the most important thing is like, what's going to be your monthly costs on that, and also, referring back to whoever their lender is and knowing, what's the potential of their monthly payment on, say $8,000 house, right? And then my job is to give them how much that property could potentially rent for so that they know the two comparisons of where one sits and the other. From there, then they would have to go back into possibly their tax strategy for their situation
Hmm.
because it could be very, very different from one person's income to another. And so there are different, a lot of factors to it, but ultimately it comes down to what's your monthly cost and what's the potential that this is going to, potential monthly rent that you're going to get on this, and see if that makes sense. I mean, obviously, looking to have some type of cash flow on that property is always the goal. And over the past, I don't know, 15 years, I never recommended anybody being negative cash flow at all. You at least wanted to have some type of profit every single month to be able to make up for whatever, potential things could come up. But essentially, you're looking to have the biggest spread between your monthly cost and what the rent is. And that, the bigger that is, the better the investment is.
Right.
But and that's the simplest explanation of what you could do with that. And then from there, you could go on to, interest that are able to deduct, all those things that, that would really get from their tax person. But I give the ideas and then they could just confirm with whoever they work with.
No, it's really true though. Cash flow is key and important, and there's a lot of creative ways to do that. And with the current markets in different states, it can be difficult. Like a
Yeah.
California and a Hawaii, because of the price point of where the homes are, it's very difficult to cash flow. But methods that people do here locally is, with short-term rentals, mid-term rentals, because the long-term rentals just don't cut it. It doesn't even come close to
Yeah.
covering the mortgage. So,
Mhm.
a lot of individuals too that are searching for opportunities to increase their investment portfolio, they are looking at different states. I know a lot of people looking in Kansas City. I know someone that actually has like 20 doors in Kansas City because the numbers made sense for them. And they
Yeah.
saw, potential down the line, of appreciation and, growing that equity. So
Yeah.
I think with regards to investment properties and being able to grow and expand, it is possible, but you have to kind of do your analysis, look at, what you mentioned, rental, what that looks like, mortgage, and kind of look at that. And, but to that point, some people get that, what is it, analysis paralysis. Have you heard of that term?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest thing, right? That if
Right.
you're a spreadsheet person, that's typically what ends up happening. And it's important. But to me, it's always better to, again, cautiously take action as opposed to, analyze, 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 and then take action. Everybody's different, uh, but yeah, I mean, having boots on the ground wherever you're going to be buying is, the biggest protection you could have against whatever analysis paralysis you could have, because otherwise you might just never invest into anything. And I've had that, people have asked me questions since 2010 about investing and buying, and even just first time buyers, sometimes they just get stuck in that analysis paralysis and
Uh-huh.
don't never get started because they have all these other ideas of what they want to do, and it just time passes.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just gonna pause for a minute.
Yep.
I got the garbage truck. I swear they come by twice a day or something. I mean, that's good for maintenance, but like, can you go? This should be just like a minute or two.
Yeah, no problem.
Have you had a meal today?
No, but I had that. I was serious with that Wendy's thing. I had Wendy's yesterday. Well, I stopped from one showing to the next one, and I was like, well, I'm gonna just get. And I feel full still from.
Oh, really? I actually like Wendy's. There's actually a salad there that's actually all right. It's like a
Yeah, I
chicken.
mean, I like it. I should have gotten a single instead of a double.
It's okay, but no, I get it. Let's see if we can try to wrap this up. Okay, may I ask another question?
Yes.
Okay. So, what are some of the up and coming areas in Vegas that you're seeing investors target?
Okay, stump me out on that one. That's a it's kind of a difficult question because theoretically, right, the newer the area, obviously it sells more expensive because we build, master plan communities, and around those master plan communities typically is what people come in and look, for either to buy or to rent, right? Because if you're being transferred here from work, you want to be in a nice area where, it's going to be comfortable for your kids and have that I don't know, life that, people always imagine. So going out, for walks in the afternoon, having a park nearby so you could take the kids, good schools, all those things. And so I think that is always, the biggest factor no matter what. And I think any investor could potentially see that when they go to a new development and just seeing how that could be, a very solid property to buy. So, we have a lot of I guess up and coming places, but that growth for each individual of those communities has already been going on since about 2017.
Hmm.
And so, for example, we have Inspirada, which is the south part of Henderson, and that area there, I find very appealing and with the greatest potential because there's so much land to still build out. And so, if you've ever driven from California here, when you're going on the 15 and you pass Gene, where they had, I think they have like, they used to have this casino with like a boat thing on it, and now it's just like a truck stop. But as soon as you pass that, like about 15 or 10 minutes, there's the first exit that like didn't exist a few years ago, and now you could actually get off there. And it actually, if you take that road, it takes you straight into Inspirada. Now you could actually start seeing homes all the way from the freeway there. And what I believe is going to happen is that that's going to start getting a little bit closer to the California side as opposed to growing down to the strip. And so the potential of how that could, grow and spread and the proximity to accessibility to California, I think it has a really good potential of being a place where a lot of people would want to be in, just because being in that particular zone, and then, saving yourself the time to go to any other part of town, which is going to save you about another 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Some people see a lot, good value in it because if you ever run into traffic on the 15, those 20 minutes will turn into, 35 or 40, unfortunately, depending where you're coming from at whatever side of Las Vegas or Henderson. So that area there of Inspirada, they're going to build one of the casinos there. If you're familiar with the Durango, that right there is in the southwest. That same company is Station Casinos. And so they already have permits set up for another one there, which will also prompt probably some type of big, large shopping center. So
Hmm.
that area there, I think, has a great potential, but it's also a little bit pricier. The association there is also a little bit pricier, but I would say just about everybody would want to be there if you didn't have to leave the area. Besides that, is just the usuals. So Summerlin, continues to grow more, and there in Summerlin, I think you could guarantee yourself to have the biggest appreciation or the biggest hold of value there for it, and it also still rents very well because everybody wants to be there. The other places, it just becomes a dynamic of actual the net value that you'll get for your rent versus what you're buying it for, right? So there's the east part of Henderson, and that Henderson is always more economic as far as what you're buying it for.
Hmm.
But the growth in that area is really, I think, taking off because there's a lot of industrial going on there. So there's going to be a lot of jobs. So that's more, workforce housing per se. And so
Uh-huh.
then that will definitely give you a solid investment on whatever rents you're going to get. Appreciation might be a little bit slower, but that part right there has a lot of more growth to continue. So your purchase price there is going to be a lot lower, but your rents there should be pretty solid in comparisons to that. And then you go on to North Las Vegas and then the Northwest, which I'm always biased because I live in the Northwest, and
That's
I
your
like the
spot.
Northwest because away from everything, and so that's just my preference of. But that's also growing quite a lot. There's a lot of properties there with the big lots, and so a lot of people like that type of a setup where the density of the properties is a little bit bigger, so then it presents a different lifestyle.
Gotcha. No, that's great. Now, Adrian, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for giving us these golden nuggets and, talking to us about investment properties and the market in Las Vegas. I wanted to end with if you were not in real estate, if you weren't doing real estate
Yeah,
and you had to change your career or do something different,
yeah.
what would that kind of look like?
Man, that's such a tough one. I've surrounded myself with just, everything, all things real estate. So I can't really imagine even, the thought of, I always wanted to go to law school. And but then that just kind of flows back to being a real estate attorney because I don't really know many. And so it's very difficult, but I can't imagine anything else. Lately, with the way housing is, I've thought a lot about being a contractor and being able to, actually build what I sell.
Mm-hmm.
That idea sounds pretty awesome, but I can't imagine myself anything else besides
That's okay.
besides
Then
real
real
estate.
estate it is. It sounds like you've built a successful career and you love what you do. And the fact that you said that you couldn't, you're not trying to run away. Because I ask this question sometimes to see if perhaps, what somebody would want to do, right? But it's all good. And, what I'll do here is I'll leave on the bottom of this video links to how to get a hold of you. Any final thoughts for anyone watching?
I would say if you're thinking about moving somewhere else, you should at least experience the Las Vegas lifestyle and also invest in here because if it's one of the places that I think it's investor friendly, but it's also friendly to somebody to actually come in here and live for a little bit. And if it doesn't work out for you, if it's too hot or whatever it could be, you're gonna have a solid investment in here that is gonna definitely grow in the future. And you could always go by to the next place you want to live in and do that. But if you have the idea of Las Vegas, you want to experience it, come check it out, be here for a couple years, work out, rent the property out, and go move somewhere else because Las Vegas is going to be here for at least another 50 years of continued growth the same way that it's been.
Well, thank you so much, Adrian, for your time. I appreciate it, and we'll
Thank you
talk
for having me.
soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Awesome conversation.